In the previous episode, we saw how the rule of Saint Benedict shaped medieval Europe through silence and monastic discipline. Link here and playlist in description. But while monasteries preserved knowledge in the quiet of their cells, on the other side of the world, in Constantinople, the deafening roar of 80,000 voices threatened to destroy the greatest empire on earth. Their battle cry, Nika, Nika, win, win. 532 AD, the revolt that almost toppled Byzantium based on real events, the Nika Revolt in Constantinople. In 532 AD, Justinian ruled from Constantinople over an empire stretching from Gibraltar to the Euphrates. But at the Hippodrome, a simple botched execution would ignite the greatest revolt in Byzantine history. How can a rivalry between fan clubs threaten the most powerful throne in the world? Welcome to the Fall of Thrones. The journey through the moments that defined medieval power continues now. Subscribe and hit the bell so you won't miss any of these journeys. Prologue. The Hippodrome in flames, the roar of the crowd echoes through the walls of Constantinople like the bellow of a wounded beast. At the Hippodrome, 80,000 souls shout in unison, Nika, Nika, win, win. But today, the cry does not celebrate a chariot race. It is the battle cry of a revolution that threatens to swallow the greatest empire in the world. January 532 AD. What began as a rivalry between fan factions transformed into the most dangerous insurrection in Byzantine history. In 5 bloody days, 3 destinies intertwined on the razor's edge between glory and ruin. Perspective I. Justinian, the emperor on the edge. Imperial Palace, January 13th, 4th day of the revolt. Justinian walks through the empty corridors of the great palace like a ghost in his own kingdom. His footsteps echo against the marble that once symbolized his greatness, now a silent witness to his possible downfall. Through the windows, he sees flames dancing across his capital. Hagia Sophia burns. The city hall is reduced to ashes. Half of Constantinople lies in ruins. How did it come to this? He murmurs, clenching his fists. Only 5 days ago, he was the autocrat of an empire stretching from Gibraltar to the Euphrates. Now, not even his guards dare meet his eyes. It all began so trivially, a simple execution of criminals at the Hippodrome. But when the rope snapped and 2 men, one green, one blue, survived, the rival factions saw a divine sign. United for the first time in decades, they turned against the true enemy, the emperor himself, Nika Nika. The cry cuts through the palace walls like blades. Win. That was what they wanted. His defeat, his humiliation, his death. Belisarius, his most loyal general, approaches, his face streaked with the soot of battle. Your Majesty, we can no longer contain the masses. They control the city. Hypatius has been proclaimed emperor at the Hippodrome. Ships are ready in the harbor. We can depart for Thessalonica tonight. Flee. The word echoes in Justinian's mind like a curse. He, who dreamed of restoring Roman greatness, considering fleeing like a thief in the night. His ancestors would turn in their graves. Never. His voice resounds through the corridors. I would rather die emperor than live as an exile. Yet even as he speaks these brave words, his hands tremble. He knows he is lying to Belisarius, to himself. Fear gnaws at him like a worm. Alone in his chambers, he contemplates the imperial diadem. Could this be his last day wearing it? Theodora appears in the shadows, silent as a panther. Her eyes, 2 flaming rubies, study her husband with an intensity that makes him shiver. It's true, she whispers. The great Justinian, successor of Caesar and Augustus, plans to abandon the throne God entrusted to him. Theodora, you don't understand. We've lost everything. The city is against us. Hypatius is a puppet. Her voice cuts the air like a blade. An ungrateful nephew who dares claim what is ours by divine right. Justinian looks away. How can he explain that it's not just Hypatius, but an entire people turned against them? How admit that perhaps they have reason to hate him? Perspective 2. Theodora, the Iron Empress, Imperial Palace. Same night, Theodora stands motionless by the window, watching the flames consume her capital. But unlike her husband, she does not see destruction. She sees opportunity. Each fire is a chance to rebuild better. Each death, space for new allies. Every moment of despair, a chance to prove what a true empress is made of. Born in the foul alleys of Constantinople, daughter of a bear trainer from the Hippodrome. She knows the streets that now rebel better than any noble of birth. She knows the crowd is like a wild beast, dangerous, but predictable, and every beast can be tamed. Your Majesty's Belisarius bursts into the room. The rebels have surrounded the palace. This is our last chance to escape. Theodora turns slowly, and the general takes a step back at the icy fury in her eyes. Escape, General. The only thing that will escape tonight is the hesitation that has poisoned this palace. She walks to the center of the room, where Justinian, Belisarius, and the other advisors surround her like pathetic shadows. Her voice, when she speaks, carries the weight of 1,000 years of empire. Gentlemen, hear me well. Perhaps for a man it is unworthy not to flee, but I consider, now more than ever, that flight is unacceptable. She pauses, letting each word sink into their souls. For one who has been emperor cannot tolerate being a fugitive. Justinian raises his eyes, and for a moment she sees the man she fell in love with, not the trembling coward before her now. If you wish to leave, Caesar, nothing stops you. There is money, ships are ready, the sea is open, but beware, do not, after saving yourself, prefer death to exile. A deadly silence. The advisors barely dare to breathe. As for me, she continues, lifting her chin with imperial pride, I remain true to the old saying, purple is a beautiful shroud. The words echo in the room like the tolling of a funeral bell, or a war bell. Belisarius kneels first, him, then the others, one by one. They all bow before the woman who refuses to flee. What are your orders, Augusta? The general asks. Theodora smiles, a smile promising both salvation and destruction. Gather your most loyal troops, Belisarius, and you Mundus bring your help. We have an empire to save, and rebels to remind why a Byzantine empress should be feared. As the generals leave to carry out their orders, Theodora remains alone with Justinian. For a moment, the iron mask falls, revealing the woman behind the empress. My love, she whispers, touching his face, you have already conquered Africa and Italy. You will not let a crowd of charioteers and merchants destroy all we have built. Justinian takes her hand, and she feels strength return to her fingers. What do you have in mind? A lesson this city will never forget. Perspective 3. Hypatius, the one-day Emperor Hippodrome of Constantinople. January 14th. Hypatius awakens on the makeshift throne like a man emerging from a fevered dream. Around him, the Hippodrome swarms with 80,000 souls cheering him as emperor. The diadem on his head weighs like molten lead, or perhaps it is just the weight of achieving the impossible. Only 6 days ago, he was merely the forgotten nephew of a deceased emperor, living in the shadows of the palace with a modest pension. Today, crowds shout his name as the savior of Byzantium, Hypatius Augustus. Hypatius Augustus. But what terrifies him most is not the cheers, it's the deadly silence that has fallen over the imperial palace in recent hours. Justinian and Theodora have vanished. Some say they fled in the night. Others whisper they are dead. But Hypatius knows Theodora. Women like her do not die quietly. Your Majesty, approaches Probus, one of the Green faction leaders who organized the revolt. The people await your first orders as emperor. Hypatius looks at the hopeful masses. He sees artisans who lost their businesses to Justinian's crushing taxes, merchants ruined by endless wars in Africa and Italy, charioteers and gladiators living each day as if it were their last. They made him emperor, and they can undo it in the blink of an eye. Let the bread taxes be abolished, he declares, and the roar of approval almost knocks him off the throne. Release all political prisoners, more cheers. But even as he speaks, part of his mind freezes with a terrible realization. He has no army of his own, no control over the imperial treasury, no allies among the aristocracy. He is emperor only as long as the crowd wishes it. Pompeius, his brother and only true ally, whispers in his ear, Hypatius, we must take the palace. Until we control the treasury and imperial archives, we are merely rebels with paper crowns. He is right, of course, but something in the palace's quiet unnerves him deeply. It is too quiet. Justinian may be many things, cruel, ambitious, despotic, but never cowardly. And Theodora, your Majesty, your Majesty. A messenger bursts into the Hippodrome, his face contorted with panic. Soldiers, in the streets. Belisarius has returned. Hypatius's blood runs cold. Belisarius the conqueror of Africa, hammer of the Vandals, the general who never knew defeat. How many men, Pompeius asks. Thousands, and more, are leaving the palace. They are surrounding the Hippodrome. The crowd is yet to notice. They continue cheering, drinking, celebrating, but Hypatius sees death approaching like a black tide. "We have to leave," he whispers to Pompeius. "Now, we cannot abandon our supporters. They would die for us, and we will die with them if we stay." But it is too late. The sound comes first, the rhythmic pounding of thousands of military boots on stone. Then come the cries, not cries of celebration, but of pure terror. The doors of the Hippodrome burst open, and Belisarius appears like a storm of steel and blood. Behind him, his troops spread across the stands like a golden plague. Hypatius rises from the throne, the diadem slipping from his sweaty head. For an eternal moment, his eyes meet Belisarius's across the rising carnage. The general does not speak. No need. His sword has already said it all. Epilogue. The price of purple, the silence that falls over Constantinople after the massacre, is louder than any shout. 30,000 bodies lie in the Hippodrome, turning the arena into a crimson lake. Snow falls over the blood-stained city like tears of blood from the heavens themselves. In the great palace, Justinian contemplates the ruins of his capital through soot-stained windows. Half the city lies destroyed, but the throne remains his. Theodora approaches from behind, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It was necessary," she whispers. They forgot that defying an emperor has consequences. Belisarius enters the room, still wearing his blood-spattered armor. In his hands, he carries the makeshift crown that once crowned a rebellious emperor. "It is done, Your Majesty. Pompeius is dead as well. The revolt has been definitively crushed." Justinian takes the crown, studying it. Made of cheap gold and fake gems, it is a pathetic parody of the imperial diadem. But for 18 hours, it was more powerful than all the armies in the world. And the reconstruction of the city. Justinian looks at Theodora, who smiles with the same icy intensity that saved his throne. "We will rebuild everything larger, more beautiful, more magnificent than before. Hagia Sophia will rise from the ashes like a phoenix. The whole world will know Constantinople cannot be destroyed." He pauses, still holding the false crown. "And we will also build a monument, so that no one forgets the price of defying the heirs of Rome." 3 years later, the new Hagia Sophia rises over Constantinople like an impossible jewel, its minarets touching the clouds. But in the city's dark alleys, mothers still whisper to their children about the day the Hippodrome drank the blood of 30,000 souls. And on moonless nights, when the wind blows strong from the Bosporus, some swear they still hear the ghostly echo of one last cry, "Nika, Nika, Nika." Imperial purple, as Theodora said, is indeed a beautiful shroud. The question is, for whom? Closing, and next episode, a capital in ruins, an empire saved by an empress who refused to flee. The Nika Revolt proved that even the most powerful throne in the world can be shaken in just days. But it also showed that true strength does not come only from armies. It comes from the courage to face the impossible. Justinian and Theodora rebuilt Constantinople more magnificent than before. Hagia Sophia rose from the ashes as a symbol of a reborn empire. Byzantium had survived the greatest revolt in its history, but only 9 years later, the same empire would face an even more devastating threat, an invisible enemy that could not be fought with swords or stopped by the walls of Constantinople. In the next episode of The Fall of Thrones, 541 AD, the plague that devastated the empire. 3 perspectives, 3 destinies. Justinian I, the emperor who survives the scourge that kills half his subjects. Procopius of Caesarea, the historian who documents the horror of the plague. John of Ephesus, the patriarch who sees in the pestilence divine wrath against a sinful empire. It will be a confrontation between faith and reason, hope and despair, that will forever change the fate of the medieval world. If you want to follow the real history of the Middle Ages, without fiction, without romanticization, subscribe to the channel. Comment below, which of the 3 perspectives impressed you most this episode? Justinian's hesitation, Theodora's courage, or Hypatius's tragedy? Remember, history is not just made by great men. It is about real people facing impossible choices in moments that define civilizations. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join us on this journey through the Middle Ages. Until next time, time travelers.